Yeah. No. Let's give it 1 sec. Alright, let's go live. Hopefully this will be up on the second channel. I don't know yet though. Alright, we're getting the monster because I'm ready to go sicko mode on these stupid criticisms I've been getting. Let's open the window a tiny bit. Pop the chat out, pop my cherry. Pop me cherry. Alright, chat's over there. Let me just share this on... Oh fuck. Okay, still there. Chat's over there. Discord first. I'm drinking Monster for 2 reasons. I bought Fascist Revolution Simulator, Far Cry 6. So I want to play that after the stream. I've been up all day, so. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Good to see a couple of you here already. Sorry, just get some stuff up. Yeah, the backlash for this video is so crazy, and I've been mischaracterized so much. It's actually really annoying. One sec. Alright. I'm gonna wait for a couple more people, but hope everyone's alright. Yeah, basically it seems to be like American leftists generally. Some people have gotten really angry with me. Like, okay, the thing is, right, I'm totally fine with good faith criticism, which I did get good faith criticism on the video. You might be watching this stream right now. And you'll be like, you know, I didn't agree with your take, but I know you're not insane. People were literally saying, I've said that China invading Taiwan is anti-colonialism. Like, that's how you do anti-colonialism. Just like batshit crazy stuff. Or saying, like, I think the IRA and the Communist Party today are, like, the same thing, essentially. And that's how, like, nuance is lost so badly, is in the sense that I was like, my only point was, like, because I'm from an Irish background, I understand how Chinese people might feel about Taiwan because it's like this monument to, like, for them at least, about the scars of colonialism. Here's an island that was taken by the Japanese, and then Chiang Kai-shek sets up an opposition government there. So I said, as an Irish person, I understand how, like, there's like scars of colonialism that you want to remove. So I talked about Northern Ireland, right? People took that as me saying that the IRA, or like even just Ireland and Taiwan, were exactly the same. And then other people were just saying, like, because the most bizarre shit to me ever is, okay, as a left-wing person, and as a lot of you guys would be, I'm anti-war, right? So when I see a shitty situation, I want to pick the one that results in the least amounts of death. So these guys say I'm, like, paid by China because I said in the video, if China invades Taiwan, I don't want the US to do anything because I don't want the potential of starting a massive regional war in Asia between, like, South Korea, Japan, America versus China and North Korea. I don't want that. I don't want the potential for millions and millions and millions of people to be killed by this absolutely massive war. Sometimes in foreign policy, in this chess game that is international relations, you just have to accept things will go away. And even though it's shitty, right? Crimea. Did anyone want the US to go to war with Russia over Crimea? Did anyone want the US to reinvade Afghanistan when the Taliban took over Kabul? Why do people, for some reason, want the US to go to war over Taiwan? I just don't understand it. Yeah, it's a shitty thing. I don't want Taiwan to be invaded by China, but if that happens, I also don't want a massive American military force to meet it, either on the ocean or in Taiwan itself. That's just, can picture that on the news for a second, right? most of you, like me, have lived in an age where there hasn't been like a massive conventional war between two global world powers, right? Imagine watching on the news US soldiers fighting with Chinese soldiers. Can you even like fathom watching that and feeling okay about that? Not like, oh shit, two nuclear powers, the most powerful countries on earth, are literally killing each other for this one island, which is of course like in China's backyard, nowhere near the United States. Do people actually think that's the left wing position, that if China invades Taiwan, the US should like respond with maximum force, potentially creating a massive regional war? And I'd ask people who say that, how many of you are going to sign up? How many of you are going to sign up to go protect Taiwan from China? And that's not a tanky position. It's just there's two shitty situations. There's an invasion of Taiwan by communist China, which will result in like thousands of deaths. And of course, this people like to say it's perfect democracy. This, in my mind, more authoritarian democracy being taken over by China. Or we could just have a massive war over it instead. Of course, I'm going to pick the least shitty option in my mind, which is minimizing deaths. The same way I didn't want the United States to fight Russia over Crimea. That's just insane talk. I don't understand how anyone who calls themselves a leftist wants these massive superpowers to fight over a tiny bit of land, especially when the land is like in the like vicinity of the other country. So Crimea used to be Russia and Taiwan used to be China. Why are we going to fight a war over that? It's just blows my mind. Like, what planet do these people live on where they think even this being conceivable is a good idea? Like I said, put yourself in that situation. Imagine next week Chinese and American troops are like killing each other, and like you get reports every day, oh, another 200 American soldiers have been killed in fighting in Taipei, or like another, I don't know, in a month like 3,000 US soldiers have been killed fighting China. And then you think about the state of the, even like global economy, think about how dominating these two forces are. It's just crazy talk. And like I said, sometimes you've got to accept stuff. And with things like Taiwan and Afghanistan, the only reason that Afghanistan government existed was because it's propped up by the US. The only reason Taiwan didn't become part of China in terms of like wasn't taken over by the communists in 1949 is because Chiang Kai-shek was backed by the Americans. If the Americans weren't backing Chiang Kai-shek, China probably would have taken over Taiwan within the next like couple years after the revolution, right? It couldn't have held out that long. It only exists because of American protection, right? So that stuff just can't last forever. If something exists based on the premise that America is going to prop you up and save you for the rest of time, especially when you're dealing with someone like China or, in the Crimea, like Russia, then sorry to say, inevitably, there's going to be a situation when, of course, the foreign policy goals of Russia and China, Russia wanted Crimea back, China want Taiwan back. Of course, you can't just say, like, we must support Taiwan forever and ever and ever, and if one day it's attacked, we must respond and attack China. Again, did you want America and NATO to attack Russia for Crimea? No, you probably didn't. So how come when it comes to China, people like love this saber rattling? I just don't understand. Are people, have I gone insane for like thinking that is the natural position, that if you are anti-war and hate violence, you take the least bad option? It's like, would you save it's like when you have to save people in terms of like even making a choice in like a video game or movie. It's like you save the maximum amount of people, right? So if the choice is go to war and kill millions, or let something happen which is obviously really, really bad. And of course the thing is as well, I don't broadly support sanctions, but you can make China more of a pariah for doing this. But what does the aftermath of a war over Taiwan even look like? That forever changes the course of world history. So it's just ridiculous. Yes, it's shitty for the people of Taiwan if this happens. Completely shitty. I don't want it to happen to them. At the same time, I just don't want millions of other people in the region to potentially die and have not only America and China, two nuclear powers. I don't want North Korea to somehow get involved, because if you start making Japan and South Korea a part of this war, which will probably happen if this did turn into a war, then what do North Korea feel like that? And that's just something you probably don't want to like start tension with. Come on, like people just think in terms of like people were saying I was Neville Chamberlain for saying this. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm Neville Chamberlain. First of all, Neville Chamberlain, when he made the Munich Agreement, he didn't live in a world of nuclear weapons and like the threat of human annihilation from war to start with. And it's, you know, Neville Chamberlain is completely different because Hitler and Germany, while they wanted to create like a wider German state, they also wanted to take over the whole of Europe and turn Eastern Europe into just like, I don't know, like farmland for Germans and genocide the native populations or the local populations there. It's not the same as China wanting Taiwan. It's literally nothing to do with it. Again, like, and my point is as well, like, that is China's like national security, like literally is China's national security. That has nothing to fucking do with the United States either. I don't know. It's just frustrating. I'm gonna go through some of the comments because my video got posted on TANKIE Circle Jerk. This subreddit from supposed leftists who all seem to support NATO and going to war over Taiwan. I fail to remember when supporting NATO was a big leftist position as well. And it gets to my broader point, like generally, most American self-described leftists, I don't even think they're leftists. They're just these liberals who support universal healthcare and might think the US does bad sometimes. And here's the wrong assumption people make. They often say, well, if I have to pick China or America, I'm picking America. You don't have to pick either of these things. You don't have to oppose Chinese imperialism. You don't have to promote American imperialism. I don't know where this logic comes from, but you have to pick one of them. How about you just don't pick either of them? And it's just like the arguments I often see for supporting Taiwan in this way are literally the arguments neocons and neoliberals use to support Israel. Like, oh, we must support Taiwan because it's this democracy surrounded by totalitarian China and other authoritarian regimes. Like, we must support Israel because it's a so-called democracy next to, Arab monarchies and military dictatorships. So therefore, we must preserve it. And of course, while I was getting pissed off, because people were also saying, like, about me, what is it with lefties being dumb motherfuckers when it comes to international relations? Do they not know the theory? I literally have a fucking master's degree in international relations. Like, one of the things I do actually fucking know about this stuff is the theory. And I don't understand why people often don't view, which international relations is like a game to a lot of people in terms of like the way you think about it. Why don't they view it like a game of chess, right? In terms of like, if you sacrifice a piece to preserve like your larger army of pieces, then that can make sense. So sacrificing Taiwan, no matter how shitty that is, it makes more sense in the long term. You have to like detach emotion from it. And people were saying I was getting emotional for talking about Ireland. I wasn't using that to justify China's position. I was using that to show how Chinese people are not crazy or evil for feeling this way about Taiwan. That was literally my only point about it. It wasn't to say, well, because I want Northern Ireland to be part of the Republic of Ireland, then every Chinese person should actually be pro-invasion and want that. And that's actually an anti-colonial position. I can't believe people actually thought like that is what I was trying to say. My point was literally, Taiwan is a scar of how awfully China was treated in its century of humiliation. To a lot of people, they're never going to let that go. It's going to be a constant reminder of this imperialism. And the only way to remedy that for some of them is invade and make it part of mainland China again, right? Is that me advocating for that position and drawing similarities between how Chinese people feel about that and how I feel about Northern Ireland? Isn't me advocating for that position, because clearly in the video I made the point that Northern Ireland as a state has accepted with the Good Friday Agreement the pretty much inevitability of it becoming part of the Republic of Ireland one day. The Good Friday Agreement says it recognises the will of the Irish people to be unified, right? It says that. And also, if there's a referendum in Ireland tomorrow, it would be fairly close. In the next 10 years, it would probably be pro-unification. That's completely different. Taiwan's president they elected in 2016 is literally part of a party who is rejecting these attempts to become unified, compared to the nationalists, ironically, who would prefer that and are working, that's a more acceptable option to them. So I'm like super disappointed because some people were like my followers, and I'm like, how fucking dense do you have to be to think I'm using my family experience of colonialism to advocate for this position. And I literally say in the video, I wouldn't, even though Northern Ireland probably is going to become part of the Republic, I still wouldn't advocate for invading it by the Republic. Like, I don't understand how people cannot see that I wasn't advocating something just by describing why people might feel a certain way. I was trying to give the perspective of I was a former colonized people, why they feel this way about essentially a country that only exists because it's been propped up by the West. Literally, and obviously it's not even recognized as a country by most Western states. A couple of them it is. So, you know, it's just like, it's just totally fucking ridiculous anyway. And it really just wound me up anyway. I'm gonna read some comments now. I'm getting hot talking about this. I'm taking off my jumper. I'm getting too angry about this. Alright. Have a little drink. Hey everyone for joining though. Just reading some comments. Based Kavernacle. Tankie in the US is a compliment for some, and that is growing because true tankies are true anti-imperialists. The thing is, I'll get into this a bit later. Okay, my understanding was Tankie was like people who like hardcore simps for like Stalin and like justify everything the USSR did as good. I thought that was basically a Tankie, or like these authoritarian socialists, or maybe saying like North Korea is like a great anti-colonial nation or some shit like that. I didn't think being a Tankie meant you support Taiwanese self-determination but just don't want to fight a war over it. How is that the same as being a Stalinist? I'm literally like taking the position that the actual Chinese government don't want me to take, and apparently I'm a Tankie for saying that stuff. And I'm going to make a video tomorrow about this because it's really pissed me off. But I was going to make this anyway. Tankie has become the new SJW. Like, you know how reactionaries, I make videos on anti-SJWs all the time. SJW is a basically meaningless term because for reactionaries, I'm an SJW, but like Joe Biden's an SJW, right? There's no meaning. So now Tankie means people like I've had fights with, like telling me trans rights is like made up by the bourgeoisie to divide the working class. I've had arguments with people about like shit like that, like crazy shit. Whereas now it also means them, but also if you don't support US imperialism and foreign policy strategies against China and recognize, you know, why this policy historically has made Chinese people feel a certain way, then you're also a Tankie who loves fucking Stalin or something. It's just like, again, like plays into my point that I don't think most American leftists, as it's like the biggest settler, one of the like literally the biggest settler colonial nation that has ever existed, I think there's a certain amount of brainwashing that many people on the left from America can't even break out of. If you somehow think the status quo that America has created in Asia is not provocative to start with and isn't imperialist, can you imagine if China had bases, aircraft carriers, navy warships all over the Caribbean, or off the coast of America on the Pacific, off the coast of LA, or like going down Mexico, or I don't know, around Canada or something? Can you imagine if China was like modernizing and completely militarizing Cuba, for example, right, with like high-tech weaponry? Or can you imagine if it had like bases all around like Dominican Republic or I don't know, Trinidad and stuff like that, or even like Jamaica? Can you even imagine? And we know the US reaction because of the Cuban Missile Crisis, but can you even imagine that? And can you even imagine China trying to justify that? Like, it's part of our national security. How? But with the US, they have this 2 island chains in the Pacific. The second one mainly made up of US colonies in the Pacific. And that's meant to be US national security. Or is that the US's empire's national security because it has so many interests in Asia, not actually about mainland US's national security? Because for the US, right, Iran making a space satellite is an area of national security, Iran, right? But things like Taiwan for China, well, that's not national security, really. Like, we can just completely militarize this small island off the coast of China. That's not an issue of national security for the Chinese, but Iran making a satellite for space is to the US, apparently. And it's just like frustrating because I'm not pro-Chinese imperialism. I don't want China to take over Taiwan. I don't want China to start taking over territory they think they have this historic right to. But I also understand why people in China feel that way about it because of the colonial period in China. Just because I acknowledge that doesn't mean I'm pro it, which is just like so frustrating to talk about. Like sometimes when I have stuff, sometimes I wrote this on Twitter actually. I'm gonna read it for you guys because I genuinely feel this way because I get very frustrated because I don't think my take was bad. I don't think it was wrong. I certainly don't think it was so wrong that the pushback I've got is like really warranted. So this is how I feel about this stuff, and it's not about like a lot of you guys in the chat because I feel like with my chat audience, who I've got to know a bit better, and obviously with my live streams, I'm way more open about my political views. Like you guys ask me anything, I answer, and people have said I've never talked about China in a bad way. If you guys come to my live streams, you guys ask me stuff all the time, and I'm straight up and I give you an honest answer. I've talked about everything, right? So then I just wrote on Twitter today. I think how I've ended up getting backlash from my own audience for certain videos is that most of my stuff is anti-right, fascist, reactionary content with some media analysis, so it can be easily consumed by many different people on the left. Some of these people then start to think I have the same politics as them, so when I actually show I have left-wing, anti-capitalist, imperialist politics, it may surprise them. So maybe I shouldn't be surprised at getting pushback, freakouts when I criticise Israel and the US imperialism while not fear-mongering and being hysterical about North Korea and China. Because I'm going to get my old tweet up quick about being the TANKIE dog whistler. And that's, you know, I got a bit of pushback on my North Korean video as well for saying about how US imperialism against them just makes the situation fucking worse. And it's like, do American leftists just love world suffering or something if the US, or like, okay, they just ignore global suffering caused by the US, but if China and North Korea do it, then you've just got to go absolutely insane about it. Why can't we criticize it all? And it feels like, I don't know, an American thing primarily, because sometimes when I'm just like, even like with how we talked about Cuba in the UK, it was like, there was no talk about like, oh, like, you know, the Cuban government is really bad, but I don't know, the Cuban government is really bad, but like we should lift the embargo. Like they had to like two sides. With the UK, just like, yeah, get the fuck away from Cuba, just lift the embargo, and they can sort themselves out. It's not like you have to moralize about these positions. And what I always like, the thing is, like I said, America, like, in my mind, and I think this is fairly like not even debatable. I think America is literally the most destructive country in the world right now. I think it has been for the last 60 years. Wrought the most death in the world, done awful like human experimentation, human rights abuses that it gets away with for being the most powerful country in the entire world, right? China is bad for a lot of that stuff. It just doesn't compare with the United States. And it never has. And potentially maybe it will. Maybe in 50 years, China will look like the Japanese Empire in the 30s or something, like some sort of brutal empire in Asia. That could, okay, I don't think that's likely, but let's say that could happen. But it's still, at the moment, that China, the US is by far the worst country in the world, like for foreign policy, for hurting people and for killing people. And by extension, most of the countries that are like second worst, third worst, fourth worst, are actually countries that are backed by the United States and funded by the United States. Saudi Arabia, Israel, countries like that. All these dictatorships in the Middle East pretty much propped up by the United States and allowed to flourish because of the United States. All these fascist dictators the US has constantly backed throughout the Cold War, including Chiang Kai-shek, the former dictator of Taiwan. So, like, but it feels like with the US that they judge morality in the world by the status quo of the US, right? It's like, while they can recognize the US is bad, it's like still the morality of the world is still in line with the US government's thinking, for example. So you can't say anything positive about the Soviet Union, like even legit good things about the Soviet Union. Again, I've made it clear a lot of times, how awful Stalin was, massive anti-Semite, authoritarian, murderer. Only good thing pretty much he did was stop Hitler in World War Two. But there's still good things to be said about the Soviet Union in general, right? Like in the 60s and 70s, even the 1980s, it's generally a pretty good place to live compared to the most of the world. Obviously, it's a massive, if you look at the history of the Soviet Union, what it became in such a short period of time is pretty remarkable. Putting the first man in space from being this massive, mainly landed country, extremely poor, run by a monarchy, it's just crazy. And I'm not saying that there wasn't brutality and stuff along the way, but if you say stuff like that, I feel like you just get called a tankie. If I say, Ho Chi Minh and Che Guevara, they're quite inspirational figures in terms of revolutionary war, it's oh, how dare you? But these American leftists will not hold people who are liberals who might be like, my hero was George Washington, this slave owner, who literally just created his own country so him and his friends could have more wealth centralized in their hands. Who did nothing to stop slavery, did native genocide and everything like that. That's okay. But Che Guevara is very bad because for some reason they associate everything Fidel Castro did with Che Guevara, even though he left Cuba a year after it became, under leadership of Fidel and everything. So that's the thing. The world is nuanced, but it feels like with a lot of American leftists, and I'm not even speaking about a creator here. I'm speaking about this stupid backlash to my video. It feels like the status quo they operate from isn't a left-wing state, not like a left-wing worldview. It's like the American worldview, and the starting point is America is the least bad, Russia's worse, China's worse. And what people do is, especially someone who loves international relations, they take the domestic, and the domestic politics of the US are pretty awful anyway, but they take the domestic politics of a country and then they like to apply that to the general view of the country. So because the US generally has better domestic policies and freedoms than Iran or maybe Russia or maybe even China, it means that the US is actually better. And that means, when something like Taiwan comes along, you can justify it. Taiwan, it's a democracy, but we should prop it up and we should defend it to the death because, while the US might be bad, China is way worse, fascist, totalitarian state. We should protect Taiwan from that. And do people not see how then you can just translate that to any sort of argument? It's literally like a neoconservative argument. The neoconservatives in the Bush administration wanted to take out every so-called rogue state and replaced it with American-backed democracy. And I'd say it's a bit more of a liberal position because you're protecting an existing democracy, but you're still doing it in the name of imperialism because America doesn't care about morals, democracy. That's how it can support countries like Saudi Arabia while crying about countries like Iran as if they are majorly different or something. I would argue that Saudi Arabia is far worse. Iran at least has some elections, even though it's not a very free country and stuff. And I feel like someone said to me before, he's like, you don't actually realise how strong the brainwashing is in America. You think it's just this general attitude and stuff, but they're no, it's so strong. And someone said to me, an American leftist who actually has good politics, was it took me ages to break out of it. It's so hard. And there's so many things we're conditioned with since birth. For me at least, I don't think Britain is as bad for this stuff, but it is pretty bad if you're growing up in a more white part of the country, patriotic, maybe a bit wealthier part of the country. I'm lucky enough that I went to a Catholic school was pretty much just filled with immigrants, and obviously I come from an Irish background, so although I have been indoctrinated somewhat in British patriotism propaganda throughout my life, I also have the Irish connection, and I've known since pretty early on in my life that these two countries have never really got on, Ireland and the UK, and of course just something you grow up with is how badly that they treated them. And the thing is, that's what I always think when I have these stupid arguments. You could literally just make the argument they're making against me for justifying Israeli imperialism, literally the exact same shit. And it's just with Taiwan specifically, my perspective on it is so clear. I don't know how anyone could take this the wrong way. But seems to me that everyone has. My general perspective is Taiwan should decide what it wants to do with itself, right? That's number one. I think that's the most important part because It seems like if I'm a tankie, I wouldn't be saying that to start with. Number two, like I've outlined earlier, I don't think the US should protect them from a Chinese invasion not because I don't think Taiwan should be independent of the mainland's government, but because I just don't want a massive war in Asia. I don't want two nuclear superpowers, the biggest in the world, fighting each other over Taiwan. I don't want potentially the Koreas to get involved in this conflict, or Japan, for example, right? And then, so that's my general point. And then the main thing is, the last bit was this, like, from someone who comes from a background of a colonized people, I was making the case that the Chinese people are not insane for wanting Taiwan to become part of China. Doesn't mean I was saying China should then invade Taiwan tomorrow to make them feel better. I was trying to give the perspective of this stuff and how colonialist scars, and this is something I feel like Americans cannot understand. The scars of colonialism don't just go away because you're like, well, that happened 40 years ago. That happened, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. So you should just get over it now. And I made the point in my video, my grandma is 91. I still see her regularly, right? I still speak to her regularly. 91, she was born in 1930. So apply that to the other country. Like, she grew up in Ireland and moved to England in 1947, right? So this is someone who was 15 at the end of World War II. If you were my grandma's age in China, you would have gone through, the Civil War, the warlord period. You would have gone through the Japanese invasion, 1937. You would have gone through the Civil War, and then you would have gone through the Cold War in China, right? You would have maybe experienced Japanese imperialism firsthand, or nationalist brutality firsthand, and then that's my point, was Taiwan is a symbol to these things because it's not part of the mainland government. It was sectioned off from Chinese control by the Japanese, then made into a colony for the Japanese, and then of course eventually became this nationalist territory as well after the Civil War. So to someone who's gone through all that stuff, that is a symbol of the imperialism they've suffered. That was my point. So that woman, if she's my grandma but Chinese, she wouldn't be crazy for wanting Taiwan to be a part of this stuff. And it's just a way to move forward from the colonial period, right? Not saying I'm advocating for China invading Taiwan to remedy this situation. The same way I'm not advocating for the Republic of Ireland to invade Northern Ireland to make me feel better about it. I wouldn't want that. If Northern Ireland didn't want to become part of the Republic, which of course is not going to happen, then I wouldn't support the Republic in invading that. I just don't want more violence and more conflict there. Of course, what actually did happen was that was kind of the situation in Ireland. That's why the IRA went there, or the IRA arose there. From, we had Republicans from the South and the North fighting in that war and stuff. But then that's my perspective. But Americans cannot seem to actually recognize this, no matter what. And I made this point in my North Korean video. People in North Korea, they're not all just insanely brainwashed. People actually would support the government based on their propaganda, which touches on this stuff, like Japanese imperialism. If you're North Korean and you're my grandma's age, right, what would you experience? You would have experienced the brutal Japanese occupation. You would then experience, like, maybe from the South, this fascist government backed by the UK, and the US. Or you may have experienced the Korean War, right, where 25% of the North Korean population were killed by mass bombing campaigns, right, and actually Japanese troops were even used in the Korean War, and Japanese just personnel were used in the Western militaries, right. How would you then feel about the West? Not only had they rebuilt the country that annexed you and treated you like absolute shit, including obviously like comfort women, that's not just a South Korean thing, it's a general Korean thing. How would you then feel about these Western countries? And could you, in theory, support the North Korean government organically? And that's what Americans seem to not be able to understand about this stuff. History is so important especially to colonized people who are still suffering the effects of colonization, or even just like they just cannot let go of this stuff because of what's happened to them as a people. And my grandma was 91, but even if she'd been dead for 20 years, she would have told my mum. My mum probably would have told me. And that's how history is kept alive. Do Native Americans forget or get over what has happened to them in America? Even the ones who aren't currently facing ethnic cleansing still today. do they just get over it because it happened, or the the last part of this genocide happened like 100 years ago or 50 years ago? Do people just get over that? So why can people not understand that people in China or North Korea or obviously in places like Ireland or generally other colonized places, they don't just get over it because you say, well, that happened this many years ago, this happened then, this happened whatever. That and I feel like like you could make, they say this to me about things like North Korea or China or anything like that, but then you can start saying about Israel, oh, Palestinians, oh, well, that was 1948, get over it. My grandma, if she was Palestinian, would have been 18 when Israel was formed. So do you know what I mean? Like, very, very conscious person, not like a 5-year-old. She would have been 18. And then think of if she grew up in Palestine throughout her life, what would have happened to her? And that's what people need to understand. History isn't that far removed, and this brutal history that colonial countries have, had in the world, doesn't just go away for people. And that's what I'm saying. Like, my grandma specifically is very, very modest. She doesn't like talking about this stuff, right? But I had my auntie who's recently passed away. She would tell me about how she was treated when she came to England, like what people would say to her, like how they might be violent to her in the workplace because she was Irish and stuff. And that is this stuff ended in 1997 for Ireland. I was born when this stuff was still going on. I was born when the IRA were bombing parts of the UK. I was born when this was still like a hot war zone in Northern Ireland. Just because I've grown up, and you'd be like, well, get over it now. It's not happening now, so why don't you just stop? It's just like, I feel like it's a ridiculous argument. But then America as a country has just gone from strength to strength to strength, colonized more and more and more territory. Let's remember, America today isn't the America that started. Was it like 13 colonies, mainly situated, like mainly in the north part, or just maybe some Midwest stuff as well. Not so sure what the original states are. Hawaii, Puerto Rico, places like the Philippines that became American colonies, Guam, obviously. Loads of other European countries owned the other south of America, like France or even Spain, and then of course Mexico used to be far bigger. And this is a country that's just colonized, and the people who have suffered from that, African Americans or Asian people or Native people, I feel like as the Americans that I get on with meta are people from these groups, because they understand what America is, where white Americans do not understand this. And even, I'm not sure about Vosh's overall takes on imperialism, but I think he's got an Irish background and stuff as well. But it just doesn't mean the same thing. How many plastic baddies do you get in America where it's like their Irish roots are like 100, 200 years old? And that's all well and good, but they just don't understand the reality of these situations generally. And that's what I'm saying, like, this is why it's so frustrating talking to white Americans a lot of the time, even left-wing ones. And I'm saying this is like a white British guy who pretty much passes for a white person, unless I'm dealing with like some fucking racist Nazis who think I'm like Chechen or Jewish or something. But they just need to understand, like, people hate America and hate American imperialism for good reason. And it's because America has constantly taken tormentors and colonizers and rebuilt them. Japan, for example, right, it never paid China reparations for the war because America told Chiang Kai-shek, yeah, drop that. We don't want that to happen. And then America rebuilds Japan. Not only that, it stops the prosecution of people who are literally charged as war criminals, like Shinzo Abe's granddad was literally a butcher in Manchuria, used slave labor, also in Korea as well. He was charged for war crimes, let off, and he became prime minister in 1957, right? If you're a Chinese person or a Korean person, you're meant to let that go. This country did all this stuff to you, and it got away with it because of America. And that's the point I think people need to remember. And generally, like, it feels like I'm banging my head against a wall, because no matter how much I try and argue this to people, they're like, oh, well, China, fascist, totalitarian, America's still better though, right? And if I have to pick one country to have influence around the world, it would be America. I feel like people don't understand what America is. And I talk about like, oh, Chinese debt traps in Africa. Do you know anything about the history of the IMF and World Bank, which are dominated by the United States? Do you know how that led to the Arab Spring? Because they make these countries privatize their economies, so the US interests and Western interests in general can go in there and, you know, just take all these natural resources for themselves. And it's just this legacy of colonialism that is so ripe today, even now. And what happened in Africa when the people rejected the colonialists and voted for socialist leaders, well, of course, the Europeans overthrew them. You know, the Congo is a great example, where they elect their own leader, then the Belgians, MI6 and America kill him essentially and put in a military dictator. Same thing in loads of places, and you think throughout the world, like, all these dictatorships America backs, and it's like, you know, if we talk about America, the Chinese debt traps for African countries, that always makes me laugh, because it's like, you're talking about that with China. Do you not know what America have made these African countries do to their economies? It's far worse than that, and that's the sort of, you know, xenophobia, xenophobia we have when discussing China. Like I've said a million times, I don't like the Chinese government. I don't think the Chinese government is some great like paragon of socialism and equality. I know about like the racial prejudices in China and the supremacist beliefs of some Han Chinese about their place in the world and about their place within China. I don't like it. I'm just not a fucking idiot who thinks somehow China's imperialism is anyway comparable to the US, who's literally designed this global system to solely benefit them, where they can do imperialism all the time and it's just normalized. Like, why are there US bases all over Europe? Why are there US bases all over Asia? Why do their military just operate wherever they want in the globe? But if another country even comes close to America, they're going absolutely apeshit. And it's just like, you know, people might be watching this right now and being like, well, what are you talking about? Like, that might personally offend you, what I'm saying, but just like, it's nothing about, okay, I'm talking about like a lot of American leftists. Of course, I know a lot of you are totally fine and normal, but like, and, you know, agree with me politically. I know there's a lot of probably white Americans in this chat right now who are probably like, you know, I'm a white American, I don't come from like a colonized people background, and I agree with you. And I know there's people like that as well. But then when this stuff comes up and when I'm getting into these arguments a lot of the time, it feels like it's almost it's either exclusively white Americans or it's like some sort of weird group of people who just love the status quo kept up by America. Like maybe it's I was arguing with someone from Croatia. There's people I've argued from obviously Cuban backgrounds in America and stuff, obviously right-wing Cubans and stuff who want American imperialism so they can overthrow the communists in Cuba and stuff. But that's generally is this, or it's something that a group that always comes up. It's Indian Hindu Vita nationalists. I'm often arguing with because for some reason I made a whole video on it. They love Israel, so they get very pissed off when I start criticizing Israel because Hindu nationalists generally hate Muslims and stuff. Anyway, that was a big long rant. So I'm going to take some of your comments now, and then we're going to go into what people were saying about me on TANKIE Circle Jerk, the most leftist subreddit I've ever seen. And then we're going to talk about all that stuff. So even the comments, the Kavernacle thinks imperialism is okay if you're not as bad as the other guy. So what if you supported Germany against the British Empire? See, look, please tell me where I said this. When I literally said, I don't want China to invade Taiwan and I don't want China to do imperialism, and I recognize it's an imperial power, it just doesn't compare to the US. It's like, and you make a good comparison. It's like saying to me in the early 1900s, well, the German Empire is just as bad as the British Empire. Well, it's not, because the British Empire dwarfed the German Empire. So by comparison, it couldn't be, you know, unless the German Empire very specifically was doing something totally barbaric and awful, which was unheard of at this time in like the early 1900s. So maybe you can make that argument about Belgium, for example, because of the genocide in Congo. But yeah, it's ridiculous. Like take your own argument. The person just said this. Compare the German Empire in 1900 to the British Empire in 1900, and please tell me what one was worse. Both are awful, yes, both are bad. Which one was worse? Which one was massive? Which one was the global hegemonic power? It was the British Empire. It wasn't the German Empire. That's part of the reason why they even got involved in World War One in the first place. Reading some more stuff. I think I've got some super chats. Sorry, I'm gonna try and find them. Sorry, I got a super chat. I'm just looking for it. I don't know how people misunderstand my point. Taiwan can determine its own future. That doesn't mean I support America fighting a war over it. I don't understand. Again, I think people don't understand my point. What do you think a war between America and China looks like? In a region that is dominated by both of them. What do you think that looks like? And who do you think, compared to like, we have massive militaries like South Korea and North Korea, do you even want to play with that type of fire? So yeah, I appreciate this comment. Thanks for the super chat though. £5. Lester Dilt. Not sure if I agree, but you're doing great work here, and your content provides much needed nuance. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks so much for the donation. And that's the thing. Like I said in the thing, I got a lot of nice comments where like, I disagree with you, and this is why, and I generally like your content, but this is why I disagree with you on this point, and blah blah blah. That's totally fine. But then like, it's just the mischaracterization and like total slander, which essentially is just slander. Like I'm gonna show you the comments that they were posting on Tanky Circle Jerk about this stuff. Soul Bunny, thanks so much for the $4.99. Professor Flowers made a video breakdown on the debate with Vosh. As a black leftist, I'd love to see you make a video on it after watching. Yeah, okay. I did want to have a look at this, but my main problem wasn't the original debate like 3 hours, and I was like, I can't. And also because I watched clips and they were just like shouting over each other. But yeah, maybe I'll go have a look again. And also, I'm totally convinced some of these arguments for Taiwan, if these people were around in the 1960s, they would be making the same arguments about South Vietnam that they are for Taiwan. I 100% believe that. I also 100% believe with, bizarrely, some people saying I was an imperialist for supporting Irish reunification, which is insane. Basically, they would generally... the thing is, a lot of these arguments for Taiwan could also be applied to Northern Ireland as well, in terms of completely supporting Northern Ireland and the status quo of Northern Ireland, like the British militarization of Northern Ireland. That's what it feels like sometimes, and that's what I mean. Like, yeah, Taiwan, I don't think it should be controlled by the mainland, because they've clearly, through their democracy, which I support democracy, they've rejected this, right? They've rejected the party, the Nationalist Party, who wants to pursue more like reunification style policies in favour of someone that wants to stay more independent, right? So I respect that totally. I just don't want a war over it. It's really, really simple. The same way I don't want, I don't want wars over Afghanistan anymore. I don't want the US to be like, well, right, the Taliban are back. They've just overthrown our democratic government. Let's go back. Let's get rid of them again. Like, you can't keep doing that forever. It's different. But the thing is, South Vietnam was a democracy as well. A sham democracy. But they'd make this argument, and they did make the argument back in the day. We have to protect South Vietnam against authoritarian North Vietnam. They made that argument, 100%. Don't anger the Voshites, it's not worth it. The thing is, right, with Vosh specifically, I literally don't even mind him. It's just his fans are so fucking stupid. And my video was posted on the Vosh subreddit, and they were all calling me a tankie in there as well. And it's like, I'm just like, are these guys all like 14 years old or something? They literally don't understand. And obviously, like, I think I assume too much of people. I think I assume there's like a baseline of like history and politics, like on the left, that you kind of have to know. And I constantly get surprised that people just don't know the most basic shit. Yeah, here's a good point by Sweet and Salty Mix. America would decimate China on a global scale in an all-out war. It's not even a question, and the destruction would be immense, and none of it on the US soil. Yeah, Of course, the people who would suffer in an American war with China wouldn't be American civilians broadly. It would be Korean civilians, it'd be Japanese civilians, it would be Taiwanese civilians and Chinese civilians. It wouldn't be Americans. Just like World War Two and World War One, why did America come out so good? Because their mainland was barely ever attacked. Okay, so here's the point I'm talking about. My view is just that Kavernacle dislikes the US far more than he should. US definitely did bad shit, but so would every other country given similar powers. Okay, how is that an argument against me hating the US? Well, US, you did like genocide in Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia, but I guess China probably would have done the same, so I'm not mad anymore. Again, I don't buy that argument at all. Sorry, it's just a ridiculous argument. Like, yeah, don't be angry at the US because other countries would do it as well. And the thing is, with the US specifically, the form of empire is completely different because it's so much more controlled and under the radar. Like, it's not as much as before, like with the British Empire, like, oh, we'll just go overthrow everyone, but the US still fucking do that. They just can't get away with it anymore in terms of, like, Bush was doing this. Bush wanted to do it to Libya. Bush wanted to do it to Iran. Bush wanted to do it to North Korea as well. He just couldn't because he fucked up Iraq and Afghanistan so bad. They want to do it. And if you want like a good example like of how if you think about like the Soviet Union even compared to the US, right? Soviet Union's imperialism was different to the US's imperialism. And that's what I mean. There's different flavors of it, so I can't even be mad at the US specific flavor of it. Like in terms of the Soviet Union, it's more about like this really like centralized control of countries in Europe and like cracking down on protest movements in some respects, and when it needs to, obviously backing other countries in wars like with Afghanistan. But with the US, it's literally like we're fighting an ideological war against or for capitalism, which we're just never, with Vietnam, I think is just the best example. If we compared Vietnam to the Soviet war in Afghanistan in terms of like how brutal they both were, because they both were super brutal conflicts, but in terms of like the ideological battle for the US is always just like, we must defeat communism no matter what. So Islamic extremism, you're our best buddies now. Here is the most advanced technology you could either get your hands on, and we're gonna unleash this. We're gonna help this Islamic extremism thrive and unleash it on the world as long as you fight the Soviets. And then like in Vietnam, it's like bomb, bomb, bomb. We're gonna poison We're gonna poison everyone with Agent Orange. We'll even poison our own troops with Agent Orange. We'll bomb all these countries. We'll just totally destroy this whole place, like complete annihilation. But we'll also do that across like multiple countries. We'll do it in Korea as well. We'll do it like every coup possible. Like even with the Soviet Union, as bad as its colonialism was, especially in Afghanistan, in terms of like how the war was fought, it still takes on different characteristics. The same way the British Empire was different to the American Empire. But it doesn't mean I have to accept any of them. Alex saying, damn curious at how there are literal genocide deniers in your chat. You do know, like, my YouTube channel is like a public channel and literally anyone can just jump in right now. And I have no mods. I'm literally the only person. $10. Noah, thank you so much for the donation. That's super, super kind of you. Noah saying, hey, Vosh fan here. I agree with you on all of this and Vosh's takes on all this, while I disagree is more nuanced than some of his dumb fans seem to make it. Yeah, I appreciate that. And, like I was saying, I know I'm going off on a bit of an anti-American rant right now. I don't think every single American is like this, white American as well. But I just think it seems to always pop up when I'm arguing about colonialism. It's mainly white Americans who are jumping in trying to justify American colonialism. Yeah, so this is a fair point as well. Jose saying, I watched Vosh and I got your point, but I'm ultimately displeased with the possible outcomes. Yeah, that's the thing. What outcome is good in this scenario, right? I guess the best scenario would be the in terms of US backs off, China backs off, Taiwan can stay like fairly autonomous. But then, like I was saying in the video, the point is, with America's provocative actions in Asia for the last 70 years, it's just not going to happen. And you have cause and effect. It's not just the Taiwan issue that linked into all of this. It's all of it. And rebuilding Japan, and that's one thing. The thing is, my video on Tuesday, I believe, it was meant to be about Korea as well. And I was going to make the broader point that people just don't forget what America did with Japan. They don't forget Japan terrorized the whole of Asia. America defeats it, at great cost to themselves. Think of how many, you guys might know them in your life, people who served in the Pacific Theater, totally brutal conflict. And then after that, they just basically no consequences, rebuild it, use Japanese soldiers to fight the Vietnamese and Koreans, and then basically say, yep, don't pay reparations. As long as you let us have some bases here, that's cool. You can't have a military, but now the Japanese self-defense force is literally better than most European countries' militaries anyway, despite being called a self-defense force. And that's even to South Koreans, right? South Koreans have to have this closer alliance with them, but South Koreans don't like Japanese in terms of the current Japanese government and the refusal to acknowledge war crimes in Asia and stuff. And like I said, history isn't just history; it affects the present. And when Japanese students are not even being taught about this stuff, it's literally been cut out of textbooks. It's so much worse than it was in the 1960s. Then this is stuff people just won't get over. The only hope for Japan is it has one of the biggest communist parties in the world, outside of a communist nation. All right, some more comments. I don't trust. I don't have mods of. The only things I have mods are on my Discord. I don't have mods on my Reddit or my YouTube channel, because I want to be the only mod on it. I go on it enough that I can mod it myself. Sorry, read some more comments. The takeaway here is online political discourse is cancer. Yeah, the thing is, right, I'm not a drama whore. I don't look for drama. Okay, I hope you guys, even if you disagree with me, I was fairly respectful to Dylan Burns' take. I really tried not to mischaracterize him and outline his positions fairly, but then say why I disagreed. I've seen a lot of people criticize others and they just go on really personal attacks. Bad Empanada is a good example of that. On Twitter, he can be an absolute lunatic. I try and be respectful because I'm trying to be not I have to be civil, and I won't rhetorically say some more harsh stuff and stuff. But at the same time, I want to keep it so I'm not bringing your personality into it. I'm just going to criticize your points from my point of view. That's what I try and do. But then everyone just saying all this stuff about me, that I'm a horrible imperialist, I'm fucking stupid and shit like that. I'm going to get into the comments in a sec. There's a really good article on The Guardian today, and it's a Chinese PhD student, and he's talking about how sickening it is that people in the West don't see Chinese people as actual people. I actually might read this on stream, to be honest. I'm gonna get it up for you and I'll stick on the thing, because it was one sec. What was it? Oh, here it is. It was a really good piece. If I have time at the end, I'll read this for you. But basically, it's what I'm saying. We don't see Chinese people as real people. They're the boogeyman. And I made a video about Tencent, the tech company, and talking about how whenever they buy something, literally every even video game commentator, not even meant to really talk about politics, are oh, China's influence and stuff again. What is this Red Scare bullshit? America, literally, Disney owns fucking everything. It's an American fucking company. And it doesn't just own entertainment, it owns like the news and sports shows and everything like that. You don't hear, oh, Americans, they're buying it, you know, Americans buying up all the British sport franchises and ruining traditionally working class clubs by trying to turn it into the NFL. We're not like, oh, America, but when it's China, it's like, oh, the Chinese are getting into football now. Oh, how scary. Again, very frustrating, because I think what often pushes people towards like the tanky side is that there's just no consistency with holding different nations to account. It's complete fear mongering about countries like China or in the past, you know, Japan, and that people don't even know their recent history. People used to say the same shit about Japan in the 1980s that they do about China today. I've made videos on this before, in that Japan is, you know, taking over the US economy from the inside, and you know, they did Pearl Harbor, and you know, we should have punished them more because now, well, they should have punished them more in my opinion, but now they're like taking over as revenge or something. Sorry, I'm in some more comments quick before I get into stuff. All right, so I'm gonna show you this post, and they deleted it because I started debating them on it and saying like, how the fuck can you call me a tankie when I literally support like the anti-Chinese government position? So they've deleted it, so you can see like this post is being deleted, blah blah blah. So basically, they just posted my video and said, oh, it's fair to say the Kavernacle is a tankie. So let's go into some of the comments here. All right, so okay, here we go. So this is one of the guy who posted it. So in terms of the views in the video, so Hassan opposes US military aid to Taiwan, calls US arms sales an escalation. Dylan Burns disagrees and points out that Taiwan has a treaty with the US for several decades. So military aid is non-negotiable and not an escalation. And I made a point in my video, status quo in this instance is escalation and is provocation. Kavernacle claims Dylan is promoting imperialism and compares the Republic of Ireland to China and Republic of China to Ireland, and says any aid to Taiwan is imperialism, also implies invasion of Taiwan by China would be an act of anti-colonialism. Again, did I ever say that? Did I ever say invading Taiwan, which I don't want, is anti-colonialism? Oh my god, how can you say what Kavernacle said with a straight face? Cognitive dissonance. How? Incredible strength of will. And then I replied, I never did though. I said I support Taiwanese self-determination, but don't want the US to fight a war over Taiwan. And someone said, so if China invades Taiwan, then what next? And then I replying to this guy, don't start a massive regional war over it, the same way I didn't want the US to fight Russia over Ukraine and Crimea, or to reinvade Afghan after the Taliban took over. What would you like to do if China invaded Taiwan? The US already has a defense agreement with Taiwan. Okay, that means we should just do whatever the defense agreement says. We should just fight a fucking massive war with China. And then someone says, this is another guy who posted it, I guess fuck NATO and the Baltic states. Yes, fuck off NATO. What leftist... This tanky circle jerk sub is meant to be a left-wing sub. Please, what leftist, what self-respecting leftist supports fucking NATO? Are you kidding me? NATO, which is so ridiculous that Bill Clinton actually said to Boris Yeltsin that Russia should join NATO. That's like what we're dealing with here, where nearly every former Soviet state in Eastern Europe has joined in an anti-Russian alliance, is somehow a good thing. Somehow doesn't provoke Russia or really cements Putin's support and stuff. And that's what people don't realise. The more you isolate these countries, they don't turn on their governments. The governments seem vindicated because they're like, well, the US, look, we told you, like Iran. Iran has hardliners and moderates. The hardliners are getting more traction because of Donald Trump and what he did. They're like, well, see, you can't trust the Americans. They're just like they were back in the day. And the same with Russia. Putin, obviously, the elections in Russia are a complete joke, right? Doesn't mean people don't like Putin and he has support. Stuff like NATO prove that. It's like, why is this relic of the Cold War still existing? Why does it have to exist? Especially after the fall of the Soviet Union as well. Which the US completely destroyed Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. Type in IMF shock therapy. Basically, the IMF, which is mainly controlled by the US, and the World Bank, tried to convert the Soviet economy or post-Soviet economy into a capitalist economy. And what happened? completely destroyed Russia. I think it was like 50% unemployment, total mass poverty, way worse than the so-called breadlines of the last days of the Soviet Union. Also gave rise to the oligarchy there, which controls politics, and Putin as a reaction to this stuff, because Boris Yeltsin presided over this fuck up of the Russian economy. So yes, I'm against fucking doing that to Russia in the first place and then keeping NATO while adding more and more countries. It's just, you know, it's also self-defeating, because especially if you're European, Russia fucking controls most of our gas. What? So you want to just like keep provoking them, be like, oh yeah, Russia who controls most of Germany and the UK's gas. Yeah, do you mind if we all just create one of the biggest military alliances just specifically to oppose you and no one else? Basically, fuck the Baltics and Cyprus. I mean, what do they not? Can you not defend yourself? Do the military bases that the Britain have on Cyprus? I don't think they are conditional on NATO, since they've had them there for fucking years. And then someone saying like, I didn't watch the video, but did he really say that? And I was like, I did not say that. And someone said, you kind of did. Yeah, I kind of did. Be very vague about it. I kind of said that. And I said, explain how supporting Taiwanese self-determination somehow means I want China to invade for anti-colonialism. This guy saying, because you make the argument why the Communist Party has the right to want to unify Taiwan, which I have to ask you, why should we care what they want? I'm more concerned what Taiwan and most people in Taiwan want. And I said, I gave the perspective of Chinese people and why it makes sense to Chinese people. I didn't literally argue for that position, when in fact I said I want Taiwan to choose what it wants. The caveat being, I don't support US intervention because I'm not pro-US imperialism, which many seem to be when it comes to Taiwan. How does that make me a tankie? Literally by any measure of how a tankie is used, I am not one. No tankie says Taiwan should determine its future. You hoped most people wouldn't watch the video so you could mischaracterize and slander me. It's obvious you can't understand nuance. And he says again, why does it matter what Chinese people want with Taiwan? Their opinion doesn't matter. I care, again, what Taiwanese people want. I also care what the Taiwanese people want. I'm given the perspective to help people understand. Again, you just slander me on this post because you were pro-NATO, pro-US hegemony. Doesn't make me a Maoist. And this is the guy who posted it, so he deleted the post after we had this big argument about it. Because he knows he's fucking wrong. He knows I didn't kind of argue for the invasion of Taiwan by China. So the Taiwanese government have blood in their hands. There's no denying that. However, many tankies equivocate what the PRC is being good, which I didn't do, but I don't think this guy watched the video. So I'll just read this because I'll engage with it. I don't really care for this comment though. Kavernacle does repeat some of the rhetoric I see from tankies, appeal to the notion of Western chauvinism, but that alone isn't by any means invalid. Okay, fair. What did bother me is his appeal to his own personal identity politics to implicate and validate the People's Republic of China's position, as well as implicitly conflate the stances of the Chinese government and its people. It's complicated. The century of humiliation is important to consider in understanding what motivates Chinese opinions, but then that also interfaces with state propaganda by the government. That said, I wouldn't jump to calling him a tankie until I hear more about his particular opinions on China's politics. I'm also biased because I generally like his body of commentary, especially on niche internet cultural topics. It would be disappointing if he shifts to being a tankie or a crypto tankie. Okay, that's a fair enough comment, right? That's a fair enough comment from this subreddit. I disagree with it because the thing is, there isn't actually much to disagree with there. He's just making the conclusion that I'm overstating how much people want Taiwan as a personal thing rather than being propagandized to want that. I don't know how those things like have to be separate. I feel like they're very similar. Like, doesn't propaganda sometimes reflect like actual beliefs of people? It's not all like you have to get your beliefs down from the top. If Iran says that the US has historically treated Iranians like shits, right? That's not them indoctrinating people to feel like feel that way. It's them playing on these beliefs that people already have and either like exaggerating them or spreading them. But again, that's a fair enough comment. And I don't think it necessarily disagrees with me either. And then someone said, I would still watch his videos. He covers how the alt-right try to recruit people through geek and nerd culture. Okay, fair enough. This one made me laugh. Why are so many leftists such dumb motherfucking cunts when it comes to foreign policy? Someone said, too much Labour theory and utopian idealism leaves little room for international political theory and horribly depressing reality to international realpolitik. They either take ideological statements of motivation at face value or they entirely disregard them and assume that geopolitics are a frozen wasteland where everything is treated as a zero-sum game of power mongering. I said, Kavernacle here. It's funny I literally have a master's in international relations, but being told I don't know the theory is funny. Presumably lots of people who don't know the theory. Alright, so go some more things. So someone else, fair enough, defending me. I don't think he's a tankie. In the video, he says he supports Taiwan self-determinism. In the comments, he claims he does not support China's growth. He did make some pretty weird arguments, though, but that's not surprising because he often is the kind of guy who has historical knowledge but no clue how to apply it in criticism. I really don't think that's the truth, to be honest. I think I'm pretty good at that, but alright, that's a fair enough comment. You can think that. Kavernacle can fuck himself in the cunt. I remember being recommended one of his videos multiple times. Years ago, I don't think I ever found a politics-related video of more blanket terms, less proof, evidence, source than that one. I think it was something to do with the Parliament or some other UK politics, but the video was just really bad, like, I say X is bad, I say X is bad. Okay, that he's saying, like, I'm really vague with my videos. I think I'm really not vague. Like, I pretty much try and source everything I say by, like, reading an article that's related. But yeah, I don't know what the fuck he's talking about there. Okay, Taiwan itself is a genocidal nationalist state that massacred 30,000 native-born Hawaiians, Taiwanese, who still remain oppressed and disadvantaged to this day, so maybe supporting them isn't the best option. So at least that got some upvotes. Someone being, you know, the indigenous people are systematically oppressed today and 70 years ago isn't long ago. I was saying stuff like this. You sound like an American conservative addressing issues natives face here. So yeah, like, I don't completely know about the oppression of native Taiwanese, so sorry if I sounded like a conservative. Like, this is what we're fucking dealing with in these fucking tanky circle jerk stuff. Doesn't know what he's talking about, backs down when he's faced with evidence and saying, oh, I didn't mean to sound like a conservative. You sound like a conservative because when it comes to US foreign policy, you act like a fucking conservative, and so many people in this thread do. This is why it's so frustrating. It doesn't make me laugh. Though. Like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to sound like a conservative, but we're all shitting on this guy with neoconservative positions because he doesn't support a war. Okay, keep reading. I'm trying to find comments that engage the video more. Saying we shouldn't romanticize Taiwan. At least someone is pointing out that Chiang Kai-shek literally fucking killed the whole native population. What's going on here? So I don't know if any of you read what was just on the screen. Okay, I can't even be bothered to engage with this comment either. The post is deleted. I hope that tanky jet will recover. This guy is such a fucking head. Does that mean a dickhead? I don't know. Okay, this is a fair comment. And Skylar Firefin, I even spoke to him on this post. Saying, I think I remember you from one of my old things. This is a fair enough post. I actually kind of said this at the start of the video, so I'll read. This is the last one on this post I read. I'm going to write out longer about my opinion on this. Context, I watched Kavernacle semi-regularly and was involved in this community heavily about a month or two ago when I took a break from politics because of my mental health. I don't think Kav is a tankie. From what I've seen, he's made it quite clear a few times he doesn't support China like a Dengist would. He said on stream he found the Communist Party of Britain weird because they praised China a lot, which, yep, I did say that. I said I literally unfollow them on Twitter because they're just supporting China loads. I do, however, think Cav is in a weird sort of meta limbo when it comes to politics. Even when I watched him, it was never 100% clear where his beliefs lie on a communist socialist state. While this means he can attract people from across the board, he can seem more played up in your head when he says something you disagree with. This has happened to me in the past, but I've gotten over it. I do think that a thumbnail and title was just bait, though. I don't think Cav is a tankie. I like the thumbnail and title would just draw ire. Also, Cav, I know you're in the thread. If you want to create anything yourself, feel free to. Skylar Varfin, if you are watching this, or if you watch this later, yeah, this is totally fair, and it's actually, like I showed you at the start, I've said this myself, is that like because of my content, the only people who really know my political opinions are if you actually watch my streams. So this guy or girl, Sky Leviathan, watched my streams. So they asked me stuff about China, and I gave them the answer. Yeah, I unfollowed the Twitter of the Communist Party in Britain because they supported China, and I thought it was just annoying. But at the same time, a lot of people who just watch my videos don't actually know my politics. And what's funny about being called a tankie is I have never, ever called myself a communist, which is like, I always say, specifically, I'm a left-wing anti-capitalist. If you want to call me a socialist, I totally don't mind that. Like, colloquially, you can call me that. Lots of people in Britain call themselves socialists without reading Karl Marx or being totally up to date on socialist theory. So just as general left-wing positions, you can call me that. I honestly don't mind at all. I've always advocated for more like, you know, in terms of just being like realistic, like nationalization of a lot of industries, more like socialist style, you know, society. But I've said multiple times, like, I'm hesitant to completely support communism, socialism, because my view on human beings as like, you know, this animal species is very, very negative. And I feel like when you have to be a communist, you have to have a more positive view of humanity than I do, which I have a really negative view of humanity. So I find that hard to reconcile that with actually being like a legit communist or something. Yeah, very, very fair, very fair comment, which I appreciate, and actually outlines a lot of points I actually have said myself about how my content maybe makes it vague what my politics are broadly, like above being like generally left wing. So when I say something like, yeah, I don't think we should go to war with China, which, you know, I thought wouldn't be controversial, and people are like, oh my God, you're Neville Chamberlain, or like you're a fascist or some shit like that. So yeah, I hope I've made that fucking clear to people, like how my videos has been completely misrepresented. There was actually a post on the Vosh subreddit. I'm going to see if I can find this quick. Let me just take this off the screen so I can look for it properly. There's a post on the Vosh subreddit. It was actually worse than this. And I did comment on that as well, so I'm just going to try and find it quick. Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to find it. Okay, let's have a look. Here it is. Is it still here? No, this is my own post. Alright, give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna try and find it. Tankie jet, Bosch. Is this it? Someone said, I just want you to know you are base beyond belief. Is this it? No, this is not the video. I don't know if it's been deleted, but I have some screenshots on my Twitter I want to show. Okay, Kavernacle. This guy's a tankie. Are you the Kavernacle? Yes, I am. Okay, I'm just gonna type Kavernacle into the Vosh subreddit. Let's have a look. Okay, there's another post of it analysing. Wait, all right, it's gone now. Annoyingly, it's gone. So I'm just gonna read you. I'm gonna read you the best comment from it. So there you go. It's on the screen for you there. All right, just getting the comments up. So fuck it. Wait. Oh, sorry. I'm trying to get people to see it properly. Alright, fuck it, I hate the Kavernacle. That guy's a tankie, but he dog whistles his points so most people don't notice. I know, right? He's a lot smarter than most tankies. Really saddening. Usually people who are good at hiding their power level are in someone's pocket. I was completely fooled for several months. Yeah, I'm just hiding my tanky power level. I'm literally trying to brainwash loads of people into my style of politics, and then I'm gonna spring on you that I'm a Stalinist. Like, I'm gonna spring on you that I think all like Jewish people are spies for Israel or something, like Stalin used to do in the Soviet Union. I'm just hiding my tanky power level. Again, fucking stupid. I'm smarter than most tankies because I hide it forever. No, like someone said, like I've made the thing, like people, I don't hide my politics. I just don't feel the need to like say at the start of every video, yo guys, how's it going? Like I'm a big leftist, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist. So just Yeah, I literally fucking tweeted this today, so get this article out. We might end the stream with this. I can take some comments now, so get them in. I'm gonna pop out the comments so I can look at them over here. All right, let's get the comments going. Right. Those guys are creating a conspiracy in their minds. Fucking exactly. Cav is base, Vosh is base, fair. TANKIE is the critical race theory for Vosh fans. A lot smarter than most tankies. You got a new slogan, yeah. Alright, read some more stuff. Alright, going up further. Cav, your damn dog whistling. Yeah, dog whistling. TANKIE dog whistling. It's like when you drop in like, yeah, we should kill all Trotskyists or some shit like that. Reddit is trash. Yeah, I do agree. Even though I love it, it is really weird. Vosh sub is 15-year-old Democrat. That honestly, I genuinely think most people in there are under 20 years old for sure. I don't even think Vosh likes his subreddit. It's like the dumbest members of his audience in one place. Can't say I disagree. Like I said, I don't even dislike Vosh. It's just fucking subreddit is just the worst. Yeah, Marxist Paul. I like him anyway, so don't need to check him out. I already like him. But TANKIE is also just like a fucking online thing anyway. Like, that's my video tomorrow is just going to be about this stuff. Like, maybe I'll use some of these clips, to be honest, of this stream. But yeah, like, because I have been spitting like super hot fire this whole stream. I am actually tempted to just fucking leave off my channel, but I probably won't because I don't want to tank my my watch time. But only the people who watch Cav streams know he's a Brody. Yeah, exactly. The indigenous peoples that make up 2% of the population of Taiwan, yeah, because they were all killed by Chiang Kai-shek, pretty much. So, alright, so reading some more stuff. People want a nuclear war over Taiwan. You'd think so over some of these comments. They wouldn't mind one, apparently. More humble, Cav. I can't be humble. Yeah, like Jose saying, a lot of people get lost in the fog. Correct me if I'm wrong, but your argument at the end was that if China was to take over Taiwan, it's not worth a nuclear war. Yeah, literally, not worth a nuclear war. Not worth a massive conventional war where like millions of people would die. As well. Just stop talking to Redditors, dude. Yeah, I probably should. Sorry, read some more stuff. Taiwan brings us wholesome things like the White Terror and the butchery of the native Taiwanese. Yeah, fucking exactly. Sorry. Yeah, okay, here's a good point. Welfare 99. Castro, Sankara, Huey Newton, Mandela, Fred Hampton, Che would all be considered tankies, not something to take seriously or treat as bad. Yeah, this is something... Thanks for commenting that. I want to talk about this quickly. Because, like, the sanitization of people like Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was, like, extremely, like, pro-Palestinian, extremely socialist. Like, the only reason South African land reform didn't happen properly under Mandela is because his party made him, like, basically undermined him at the end. He wanted to do this. He had a radical, more socialist agenda when he became in, but he got convinced not to do it. And who was fucking Nelson Mandela's best buddy? Fucking Fidel Castro. Which fucking country fought the apartheid government in like combat? Cuba sent troops to Angola to fight these racist fascists, right? And it's like, if we bring this up, it's like, oh, it's really problematic. Cuba, tankies, Nelson Mandela. Yeah, literally, 100%. If this type of crap online discourse was around in the 1980s, we'd be calling all these people tankies. But that's my problem with tankies broadly, is like, where do we draw the line, right? So if we all accepted that tanky referred to like hardcore Stalinists or something, I'd perfectly be happy to accept it as like a phrase to use. But now I'm sure some people would call anyone a tanky who remotely has anything positive to say about a communist nation. If you talk about like, maybe you think it's good that Cuba fought against South Africa, or maybe you talk about Cuban healthcare, or maybe you talk about how, you know, Cuba and Vietnam, especially Vietnam, relatively under like the aftermath of war and sanctions, have done fairly well. And although they might not have the like, you know, freedoms, like you can go out on the street corner and say whatever the fuck you want, maybe like there is some benefits to living in a society where you have healthcare, housing, education, things like that. But it feels like if you even say that, it's like tanky, tanky, tanky. Whereas if you praise the US, this massive settler colonial nation, then that's okay. But praising any other nation, specifically praising countries that overthrew the settler colonialists specifically, and, you know, decided what they wanted to do, because that's the thing we've got to remember sometimes, is that countries like Cuba, Vietnam, they you know, Vietnam has its own forms of democracy in various areas, but it's like they can't just like think Cuba and Vietnam specifically aren't like North Korea, right? They're not like these totalitarian or more like extreme authoritarian dictatorships where they could just really, really, if they wanted to, crack down the population with no consequences. That just can't happen in Vietnam. So maybe people who throw tanky around might want to accept that, like, some people just like living in these countries. Like, my girlfriend's brother lives in Vietnam and has done for 10 years. He like fucking loves it there. Like, his girlfriend lives there. It's not like people crying about, oh my god, I'm oppressed by communism and shit like that. Sorry, that's all comments. With the new definitions, I would wear tanky as a badge of honour. Alright, read some more stuff. Rest in peace, you're already accused of genocide, the nut. Yeah. I can't. The thing is, stuff like that is so ridiculous. I don't even know what they're talking about. Like, it's not even that like I'm having a take about something even related to that. It's like, just throw it out to me because someone maybe in the comments of my live stream, which I'm not even looking at, said some shit about that. All the Cubans are good at baseball. Yeah, Fidel Castro loves his baseball. Cuba and Angola is imperialism to these morons. Vosh fans said that. Yeah, like, okay, what was imperialist about Cuba? What, they went and fought and then all left. And most of the shit that was said about them at the time was made up by the CIA. Literally, there's a CIA officer admitting how they used to manipulate Western media about what Cuba were doing there. I mean, I fucking respect the Cubans who went there. You're fucking fighting the apartheid South Africans, fucking fascists. You might as well be fighting the Nazis. What someone asked me in the chat. Kavernacle is directly accountable for the chat's cringe takes. What's your opinion on the IRA? I mean, IRA has different forms, so I don't know which one you're specifically talking to. Yeah, but someone saying in the chat, yeah, I made it clear in my other video, my family were in the old IRA, the 1910s one, and the late 1800s one, or the IRB as it was called. My grandma says her brothers were in the 1940s one. I haven't spoken to her enough about that though, but I think they were. In terms of like, the thing is, you know, it's hard to moralize about conflict because obviously innocent civilians dying and everything is awful no matter what the context is, and Ireland is particularly brutal in the north because it's like this almost civil war essentially. But broadly, yeah, like I support the goals of republicanism, and at the end of the day, despite it's shitty, but like the Good Friday Agreement was a political settlement, right? It's not just a peace deal, which it is a peace deal. It's a peace deal which is a compromise, but a compromise that does recognise the goals of the IRA, which potentially wouldn't have been done if they didn't fight the British soldiers in Northern Ireland, right? And it's like these IRA people were funded by Republicans in the US, not realising that most of them probably fucking hate American Republicans as well. Wind that shakes the barley is good, yeah. Based Cav IRA lineage. Literally like someone who drafted the Irish, or wrote the Irish Declaration of Independence essentially is related to me. Irish unification, yeah. Alright, so I wanted, we got a bit more time, because I was streaming early for a reason. Oh fuck, no. Lucky I'm looking at the chat, this thing is back. It always comes in. Webcam chat, oh fuck. Fucking hell, that's why I need mods. That always comes in. Kavernacle is the irony, not the porn bots. Yeah, exactly. Alright, for the final bit of the stream, I want to read this article, and it's very, very timely. It came out on Tuesday, and it really gets to the heart of what I've been trying to say while giving, like, generally, takes on anti-colonialism and stuff. Alright, so let's get to this. Alright, so, sorry, just going to move some stuff around. Alright, the West sees China as a threat, not a real place of real people. I was at dinner with a friend and she asked me about my work. Name one thing you wish America knew about China. That the Chinese people are people, I replied. She asked me to elaborate. I said that the people of China are really not so different from the people here, that we possess as much humanity as people anywhere. It was an uncomfortable exchange. My friend is white and American, and I'm neither. I regretted my response, that my answer to her was well-intentioned, questioned, and this implied an accusation. I dropped the unbearable weight of race into a light-hearted conversation, but race is always on the table and in the air, even when some of us are conditioned to see it. I'm going to skip forward a bit. Bit more, because I read this earlier. Okay. I'm not saying only Chinese people can study China. Lived experience does not equate to expertise, and diverse backgrounds bring fresh perspectives. The metrics seen as criteria for authenticity, such as being able to speak Chinese or having spent time in the country, can also be used to exclude. The real issue here, then, is not about who or where, but how, and more importantly, why and what for. What kind of knowledge about China does the West produce? According to a newly published survey by the National Committee on US-China Relations, there's a growing demand for work on China in the US, but the discourse is increasingly dominated by national security concerns, and one respondent put it, the field lacks diversity in the extreme. Filtered through the lens of state interest, a country becomes a challenge, a threat, an issue to be solved. National borders align with racialized boundaries of one's imaginative sympathy, and the Chinese people are morphed into a label, a statistic. In the prevalent narratives about China, the central government, and I agree with so much of this, is an almighty monster embarking on world domination. I've made whole videos about this in general, imbued with an ancient foresight and effortlessly expressing its will through the vast bureaucracy of the government. Public expression in China is either protest or propaganda, and the people are either helpless victims or mindless foot soldiers of state oppression. Politicians and commentators in the US boast of plans to secure the South China Sea or protect Taiwan with military force. The potential loss of life on another continent is of little concern when the real objective is maintaining American power. The worst abuses of the Chinese government are appropriated to advance domestic agendas. Many postulate punishing China for its human rights record. Few pause to ponder whether the punishment might harm the very people whose rights they claim to defend. At public forums and private conversations, I'm often asked, what does China want and how should we deal with them? The choice of pronouns is revealing, placing me neither here nor there. I never know how to address these broad questions, as if I'm some kind of dragon whisperer. Those who default to such generalizations do not really want to know China as a place. They much prefer it as an idea, a geopolitical concept that can be distilled into sound bites and translated into policy, White men can rebrand as China experts overnight and charge a fortune for their insights, while a Chinese person is more likely to be heard as a dissident than a scholar. A lone crusader against an oppressive superpower makes for an appealing narrative. It substantiates the West's notion of China as an embodiment of authoritarian evil. It affirms to a Western audience their sense of superiority. Insufficient denunciation of Chinese regime casts doubts on one's scholarship in China, regardless of its areas of focus. And I feel like that's just a broad point. Because I don't denounce China like a lunatic neocon, apparently I'm pro everything it does. That's what's been happening lately. My disappointment with the biases in my profession is not a personal grievance. The heart of the matter is not how the West understands China, but how much the West understands itself. The rise of China and its role in global capitalism have challenged the economic dominance of the West and shattered the convenient notion that the market necessarily brings freedom. To create the impression that problems of political oppression or technological abuse are uniquely Chinese is to refuse the knowledge of the complexity of governance as well as humanity. Instead of confronting the truth about oneself, it's much easier to collapse everything into a false binary and project fears onto a faceless other. The West is not the only party guilty of this logic. With every passing news cycle, carelessly talking about the latest Chinese threat, as my birth country and adopted home appear locked in a great power rivalry, I feel the ground splitting beneath my feet. I sometimes wonder if this precariousness is the price I must pay for leaving my homeland. Then I remind myself that generations have persisted in the margins and contested the artificial divisions that discount their humanity. If we gather enough of us and reclaim those margins, a new world may be born where no one is an exile. So I really like that article, especially from a Chinese perspective, of course, because it fits into a lot. I've said in my videos is that this belief that the people of China and the government of China are essentially working in lockstep. It's like a hive mind. It's like the Asiatic hordes, essentially. There's no humanity there. There's no individualism. There's no freedom. There's no anything between Chinese people. Essentially, like this person was saying, Chinese people aren't real people to the US policy establishment, to US scholars, to general Americans, I feel like, worse than other countries, is they're just a challenge to US supremacy. And the challenge means, like you see with this rhetoric in America about foreign Chinese students, they're saying we shouldn't let these Chinese students in because they're going to go home and take the skills and work for the Chinese state. Not that China has loads of private businesses. Yes, I know the relationship in China between private business and government is different than the US generally, because if you want a lot of opportunities in the corporate world of China, you have to be a member of the Communist Party. Not that necessarily means you're literally talking to Xi Jinping on the phone or anything, but it's just a really interesting article about generally what I'm saying, and you can see with the reaction, if I want to make a final point, you can see with the reaction to my video how people don't see Chinese people as real people, because a lot of people saying the simple fact I outlined how Chinese people might feel about Taiwan and imperialism got changed into, well, Kavernacle says that Taiwan and Northern Ireland are basically the same thing, therefore it's good to invade Taiwan from China because it's all just one thing. Not that I'm trying to point out that Chinese people and the government have grievances about colonialism, and it's important to recognise those and recognise how we've caused a situation where people feel this way. And as someone who comes from a background who suffered from colonialism, I sympathise to a degree and understand to a degree. Doesn't mean I necessarily support what they want to do. And generally, just like other people, Chinese people don't all want to invade Taiwan either. Even people on the mainland who support it becoming part of the mainland's government again. Right, reading some more comments. Yeah, Orientalism, Michael Cochran. I reference Orientalism so much, I feel like a poli-sci basic bitch. But yeah, very, very interesting for China specifically, yeah. So I read some more stuff. I want Chinese food. There's a really good Chinese me and my girlfriend get. I really want some at the moment. Yeah, this is interesting. Brown Buster saying, didn't Western outsourcing turn China into a powerhouse? How are you going to start a war with a country where most of your goods are manufactured? Yeah, I mean, that's another like consequence of even saber rattling about this stuff. Is like the American and Chinese economy is so tied up with one another, but the Americans rely on the Chinese economy more than the Chinese rely on the American economy. Yeah, Noah saying, did you ever watch Michael Brooks before he sadly passed? I consider his takes as close as it comes to gold. And you seem to take similar takes, probably your education. Yeah, like Michael Brooks was good for international relations. I didn't watch him loads and loads, but he obviously had good coverage on like Brazil and everything. I feel like it's just like, general interest in international issues, which I have, mixed with like more leftist views, maybe make us a bit similar. All right, so read a couple more comments, and then I might go off to play Right Wing Revolution Simulator, Far Cry 6. So I'm just reading some more comments. But yeah, it's just like generally, if I'm gonna like sum up the whole stream, I guess, is that it is like this is a massive problem in terms of like and a massive, I guess, divergence between American supposed leftists, because I feel like a problem generally with the American left online, as I've experienced it, is that American leftists still have a lot of traits of Western chauvinism and just like generally thinking the American hegemony in the world is like the least bad thing of a bad bunch of options. I don't know, like you could have, they would say like you could have China, you could have America, you could have Russia. I don't like America, but let's have America instead. And not really realizing the role America plays in just causing so many nations to suffer. Like I said, how many of you think America is responsible for the Arab Spring, for example, American economic policies? And you'd think, well, Egypt, Tunisia, places like that, what's that got to do with America? But if you research things like the IMF, which America actually created in 1944, and how they're responsible for privatizing these economies for American interests, while America prop up these authoritarian governments, and the youth in these countries obviously revolted because what happens in these privatized economies is both like youth have no opportunities, workers are getting screwed, and everything like that. But that's just like one example. And Obama backed Mubarak until like the last instance, and then of course when Morsi comes in from the Muslim Brotherhood, it's probably not surprising America and Israel back Sisi so bad, considering he did a coup against them. But that's just like one instance. It's like the American influence all over the world, it is very, very hidden to a lot of people. So I think somehow American leftists generally think that American imperialism is not as bad as it actually is, basically. And the version and just the normalization, like how crazy is it that America is the only country it's allowed to go around the world, and when it gets threatened, it talks about there being a threat to its national security. Like when it bumps into an Iranian ship in the Gulf, what's the Gulf? So the Persian Gulf. The Persian Gulf, literally on the Iranian coast, it bumps into an American ship and it's like, oh, there's tensions in the Persian Gulf between America and Iran. That's literally Iran's coastline. And we're talking about American national security. Like, just how crazy is that we've normalized this US imperialism to such a degree, we don't think that's wild. Like, America is thousands of miles away from America talking about national security while infringing on the actual national security of other nations just because we're fed to believe that, like, Iran is just the crazy evil country that should be excluded until the people rise up and topple the Ayatollah or something. Not that the Iranian government and revolution was a response to Western imperialism in the first place. And it's just like so many of these problems in the world. Like we think of, like I've explained in the video, we think of North Korea, right? What do we do about North Korea? But North Korea and how it is today is a reaction to Western colonialism and its alliances with like South Korea and Japan. And that alliance and the militarization of that region has contributed to that country becoming further isolated in terms of the US sanctions or just being more hostile to them. Again, this doesn't mean to say North Korea is innocent. I never ever want to make that point, but my point is how that exists. And Vosh made this take on one of his streams. Like, I wish South Korea won the Korean War because it wouldn't be a hellhole today. Not recognizing, that you're looking at history through your contemporary politics. You're saying I wish South Korea won, because look at North Korea today. Not that South Korea was a fascist dictatorship during the Korean War, and maybe if the Korean War didn't go this way and this overwhelming force using the Korean people, which decimated their country and everything, maybe North Korea wouldn't be like how it is today. And it's the same. It's the same with China and things like Taiwan. That's my main point. Is like these governments the US don't like are nearly always created in response to the US or just general Western colonialism. That goes for China, Iran. It goes for North Korea. It goes through like a lot of these places. Vietnam as well, Cuba. What are these things responses to? And then to then demonize them further and be like evil, evil, evil. We're the best. We're just gonna throw our military all around the world, and somehow that's good. And that's the thing you got to remember is like, even if you want to take your morals out of it, just think of it as like a chess game or like some sort of like strategy game. Just think about how much reach the US have in every theater of the world. They have massive military presence in Asia. They have a massive military presence in the Middle East. They have a massive military presence in Europe. Obviously, they have a massive military presence in America. The only place they don't have a massive military presence compared to the others is South America, probably because it's so close. They don't need it there. But just think that. Imagine if China had this military presence all around the world, just everywhere. And think of how insane people would be going. Think of how insane people would be going if it only built up its military presence in like one part of the world. Think of how insane people go about it building up its military presence in Africa. Again, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but compare it to the US and compare the reaction to that and compare, how we generally feel about it. And that's what my main point with this whole thing is that Americans, I feel like, need more help to break out of this brainwashing, which is so effective. I always say North Korea and countries like that probably like study America. Like, how do you get a population to like willingly brainwash itself into insane imperialism? Because in countries where you have to propagandize your citizens more, we find it a lot harder. And just like you can't be anti-colonialism while arguing for imperialist positions. And even just like you can't be anti-war while saying that like you want to go to war over Taiwan, like without realizing you can't look at this thing in a vacuum where it's just like rhetoric. Think about the reality of what you've just said. The same way we've been saying I wouldn't want the US to go to war over Crimea, because think of the reality of what that looks like. You can't just look at things in a vacuum without history and just look at it through like really immediate contemporary politics and everything. And also not to mention massive dehumanization of Asian people, particularly Chinese people, which is nothing new. Someone mentioned Orientalism in the chat earlier. It's been going on for centuries. Like, how has America traditionally treated Asian people? Like massive bombing campaigns and genocide, essentially, while being extremely racist to them at home as well. And it's just like, even back in the day, obviously this never held up, but some Asian countries actually welcomed the Japanese during the Sino-Japanese War and World War II, because they're like, Asian liberators quickly found out that the Japanese didn't view them as equals or anything like that. But like it's something to keep in mind how people generally feel about Western colonialism, and it's extremely privileged and the product of living in a settler colonial nation which literally enriches itself on the rest of the world, that you think somehow this is a benefit for the world because the other options are unthinkable. Whereas for me, what I'd probably rather is a more balanced status quo between various world powers. Like you have the BRIC conference recently. Don't know if South Africa really fits into that, but you have Brazil, Russia, India, and China. If we balance that off against like America and the EU, I'd rather more of a balanced world. If we like people thinking like zero sum, like it's got to be America dominating or it's got to be China, so I got to pick one. Whereas for me, I'm like, if I have to pick of a world dominated by major powers, I'd rather have more like division between them, just to have some semblance of like a balance of power. So like I said, BRIC nations versus EU and America or something like that. And rather than like people think like, well, if not America, let's just have, it has to be China or it has to be Russia or it has to be something like that. And it's not like I want any of this. I want, the world to be like on good terms with each other, and we all just like helping humanity, and we don't have these ridiculous Cold Wars and stuff, but that's just the world we exist in right now. Read a couple comments and then I'm off, I think. I don't even know what people are talking about in the chat. So reading some more stuff. We think Cav is on demon time, but this fool Bertrand is on another level. What is Bertram saying? I don't even know what he's saying. I'm not even able to find out. Okay, I'm not reading the chat, so I don't know what you guys are talking about. All right, so that is it for the chat. That is it for the live stream, I think. If you want to watch this later, like in its entirety, I'm gonna post it on the Kavernacle extra. Hopefully later tonight, but let's see, because sometimes it takes fucking ages to render the whole thing up. So I don't know. We'll see later. Yeah, hopefully. I think the chat's been a bit crazy today, so I don't really know what's been going on. Obviously, I can't moderate it because we've got a lot of. I had like 250 people at one point, so everyone's spamming the chat. But yeah. I'm off to play anti-communism simulator. If Far Cry 6 is like extremely anti-communist and is clearly making a point about contemporary Cuba, I'll probably make a video about it as well. Fun stream, spicy chat. Oh, Bertram doubts the Yuga genocide. Okay, he's just one of those types then. Maybe someone who you could maybe call a tankie, even though I don't like that word. Yeah, thanks for nice words, everyone. Thanks, Mostradamus, Little Fox, other people as well. But yeah, one video tomorrow, which I may use clips from this stream to just illustrate. But yeah, this tankie discourse is just pretty maddening as well, and we'll see what happens. Chat is actually well behaved considering the lack of mods. Hopefully I've cultivated like a nice enough community, and then I thought, no, TY, the actor literally said it's based on Fidel Castro and Hitler. So that's fucking interesting. Please post the streams. Yeah, the stream is going to be on my second channel, Kavernacle Extra. So type that in. Let's hit 1,000 subs on it soon. All right. So yeah, chat was chill today. I hope it was. I wasn't really looking. But yeah, let's just get up the thing. All right then, so thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. Hopefully I clarified everything I wanted to say. And then thanks for the super chats, people who gave them. Sorry if I didn't get around to your comments just because I was going off on a mad one. I may stream on Saturday just because I'm free, because my video got demonetized yesterday for some fucking strange reason. And I like money. I'm a capitalist now. Anyway, video tomorrow. Maybe stream on Saturday. Kavernacle Extra for archive streams, and check out the stuff this week if you haven't. If you haven't checked out the video about Taiwan, go check it out. Now you have this full context. And yeah, okay. I'll see all you guys in the next one, whether that is Saturday or next.